Alright guys, so we're going to redo part of the lesson that we did. I'm going to rearrange the entire setup because I found some code that works. I'll be building from that code, but here's how it goes. I've already created a project file. I've named it content, but this is where we're going to put our information. The existing code looks something like that. So here's how you can be able to also design your code or design your form using something that is existing. So at the same time, we might need to add certain things to our form. This is the current form that is there, but we want to design it to suit what we want, so that we can be able to work with our code or work with our design to suit what we're hoping to do. So we'll get some of the content there, but we'll change the titles and certain elements that we've got there. So the first thing we want to change is the name of the form. We want to be able to get information update, like that. So we are going to be designing this to suit what we hope to achieve. So the first things first, we come to our toolbox, we look for our content. So the first thing we want is a group box. We'll make a group box for everything that is going to be there, and we then make it relevant to our content. We also want to change the name of that to say details to be used, like that. And these details will then follow what we've got there. So we want more or less the same things that we've got. We want to change a little bit of how this looks. For example, this load record, for us, we want to be able to put it as part of this. We want to change the content that is there. We also want to change the context of the list view. So the next thing we need to do is we just need to verify what this is. That is a data grid view, so we also need to add that. The rest are text boxes and button. So let's do the adding of the content that we want. The first thing we want is a data grid view. So we come back to our toolbox, we look for a data grid view, we put it, and then it requires a data source, columns, etc., but not now. We just want to make sure we get our look right. Okay, so we do our data grid view like that. Maybe let's just make it a bit bigger so that it looks like that. The next thing we want to do now is to put our text boxes, our buttons, and everything else that follows. So we want 4 buttons. We just come back here, double click, and we add our 4 buttons. So each time you double click, you'll be adding a button to our work, and here's how it will look. So we copy the content that is there. So we've got save, update, delete, and that becomes load or add. Let's change ours to add, and we do it as follows. So we highlight the button. First of all, we want to change the name to load / add. That's the text property of the button. And then we want to change the name property again to btn load. The next one is updates. btn update becomes the name property of our button, and then the next element is our text. We want to put Okay, the next one should be save. That becomes the text property, and the name property becomes btn save. That the last one should be delete, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, we've got delete. So in our new contexts, we want btn delete, and then the text property becomes delete, like that. So we've got load, update, save, and delete. The next content that we want is to be able to put the items that we want. So like I said, we're going to be working with this as our baseline, but we need to change a few items. We've got an item name, we've got a description, we've got a quantity, we've got a price. So we want to add more or less the same details, but we want to add the following content. We want a name, definitely a name we need. So let's put the first element that we want to be our product name, right? That becomes the first label. We need another label, which is I added another one. Outside of product name, we need a quantity. Okay, that becomes the next element. Let me just pause this because it will continuously make noise. Okay, I think that's fine. So we want a quantity. We also want a price. Let's actually work with a price. Okay. Outside of a price, we want available total. Let's actually put it as available quantity. I don't know if that makes sense. A total or quantity, one of the two should make sense. No, let's actually put it as items in stock. Okay, so we've got our product name, our quantity, our price, our items in stock, and I think we can work with that as it now. So the next thing we want to put is our text boxes, which will be 4 as well. So this then becomes our items in stock. This then becomes our price. This then becomes our quantity. This then becomes our product name. So maybe let's just make them a little bit bigger so that we've got the content that we want to work with, like that. So as it stands, we'll then have our interface in order. We may add more content as we go, but so far this then becomes the starting point of where our application would be. So we want to actually add this and see how this works and how this runs. So already as it stands, this project here, I'll send you a copy of this project. If I run it, it's giving me an error. So we're also going to fix that problem. It's telling us that our connection is not registered on the local machine, which is something that we can fix, but we will not fix this particular project. We'll try and bypass it in our own project. where we can be able to then see where it goes. So if we try and load the project, it will still tell us that. If we save, it tells us exactly that. But that's not what we want to be working with as of now. So we can go to the code and realize that this is what our code looks like. So in essence, after you have designed your project, you can pretty much then work with our code as follows, and this then becomes how our project will look like. So as of now, I'll end here. The next thing we want to do now is to add a few naming that we'll use for our product. So the first one is product name, which will be txt product name. That's the first one. The next one is txt quantity. The next one is txt price. The next one is txt items. Okay, we leave it at that. So what we now need to do is we've got our interface ready. We've got some of the things that we need. The last thing we need is our database. So before I actually get there, let's rename our form. I want to rename it to main add. Okay, something like that. So we'll explain how some of these things work, because we might need to add certain things to our forms. So just naming our form helps us to know the type of form that we want to work with and the quantity that we'll be dealing with and working with for our forms. So the next thing we want to do now is we want to open our access and then we create a database. So our database will simply be a database that contains the information that we want to work with, and we'll be using our database to connect to our application so that our application does what we're hoping to see it do. Okay, so we open our access file like that. We save it as, we want to save it as a access 2002-2003 database, and then okay, so it's about to open for us where we want to save it. So we go to Visual Studio 2015, we go to projects, we go to content, we select content, then we want to save a database there. We call our database content like that, so that it's a content, and then here make sure it's a 2002-2003 database. We click on save so that we've got our database saved. So we go to enable content. We now want to put our tables. So our tables work as follows. We simply go to create, we select table, and then we want to go to design view. So we need to save our table. So TBL products like that. Click on OK, and then automatically we get the first product. So how we work with our database is as follows. We come to our page, we've got a product name, so that's the first element that we want. Product name. This we want it to be long text. After product name, we've got quantity. So the next one is quantity. We can leave it as short text, that's fine. The next one we want is price. We also leave it as short text. The next one we want is items in stock. So items, you can just call it items. And this one we want it to be a currency. No, let's actually put it as a number. Okay, so we click on save, and then we now have our products. Okay, so we actually put it as currency. Let's actually go back and change that. Why is it giving us that? Okay, let's just put a product to test it. So we can call it kettle. We can have a quantity of 5, a price of 12, our items being 50. Okay. But it's actually formatting it wrong. Not sure why it's formatting it wrong, but let's just work with it for now. We'll try and figure out how to sort it out and have it working. Okay, so this then becomes the first part of our code. The next part, we will work on it. Hopefully we can be able to finish it in this particular lesson. I'll try and combine them and make sure that we've got everything that we want to work with. Okay, so we've got our database, we've got our design working. We now want to get our code. So the first thing that we want to actually work with is our database connection, or our database look. So this is the code that we'll be wanting to work with. We might need to change it a little bit. Okay, first things first, there's certain things that we would want. The first one is our connection, which is that one. The next one is our SQL string, which is that one. The next one is our command, which is that one. The next one is our integer, which is I, and then the next one is that. So we'll be working with these side by side. So I can just copy this, and then I'll explain to you how each element works, so that when we are in our code, we can be able to see how we can do that. So we come to our code, and then we paste our code. So it comes before everything else. No, that won't work. I think it needs to come within the class like that. Okay, so these are the elements that we've got, but because we are copying this, we need to comment this out and declare our own variables. Okay, so for the first thing, we will not work with the first line because we're going to change that, but we need the variables as they are, or we can change them to have our own variables. So to declare our variables, we simply say dim, and then we need our string. So we can call it constr, which is our connection string, as string, which in that case would be similar to our SQL string. Okay. The next one is we want to declare another variable, which is our command. So dim, we want a Ole command that we'll be working with, which we can put as the following: cmd okay, cmd I think will be fine. We'll just copy it as it is, as new Ole db dot Ole db command, like that. Okay, this one we didn't change, we just copied it as it is. We need an integer, So we won't use I. Let's put our own dim x as integer. Okay, this gives us the same one as I, so maybe we can put a comment to show that similar to I, like that. The next one is we need a data adapter, so we can put dim adpt as new oledb dot oledb data adapter. Okay, here we then maybe need to explain what this is. Okay, we're simply saying we want to have a connection that we use the contents of the database. Okay, so our data adapter pretty much gives us what we would want. Okay, so here's the original connection string, but we might need to change how this works. And I also don't like the way this person has used it. Okay, so let's quickly go to Google and look for something. We want to say connection. Let's see what this says, so that helps to look for it. OleDB connection using data directory. That's what we want to use. OleDB connection using data directory. Okay, let's just see what it gives us. The internet is a bit on the slow side, but let's see. Using a data directory. Okay, so I got some code that helps us create this value here. So let's create that line at the bottom there. Doesn't really matter where we create it, but let's do it as follows. So we need our connection, so we call it an Ole connection instead of our con that we've got there, as new OleDB dot OleDB connection, like that. And then we need to specify the contents of this connection. So our contents, we need a provider, and our provider, we want it to be Microsoft. Okay, and then we still need the ACE connection. We need our Ole DB. We need our 12. We need our 0. And then we've got our semicolon. We then now need our data source. Okay, so our data source will be as follows. Here's what we need to now put. We are replacing this bit with that bit. So I had already gotten this. So we just need that line of code, but for you guys, you'll be needing to copy it. Although I think we don't need this. I doubt we need this. but let's just try it out and see if it works. If we've got any challenges, I'm sure we can fix it up as we proceed. So these are elements that we need to now work with. So we might need to test it to see if this works, because as you can see, we've got these, but we now need to test our connection. So we now need to have this try catch statement. So this goes into our form load property. So we now need to get our form load property. Here we've got form1 load, but in our case we've got main.add. So we now need to have a main.add property. Okay, main add events, and then we want a load. Okay, so here's how I did it. In the code section, I just looked at main add events. In this section, I just selected the load, although there's many elements that you can work with. And then this then gives us that particular content. So we want a try catch statement. We just simply put try, we put enter, and it puts that particular content in our code. So what we want to try, let's go back to the previous code, and we are just going to be using this content that we've got. So the first thing we want to do is to make sure we have an open connection. So our connection is now different from this one. So we just put open connection. I copy that. I come to this particular instance. I put my comment. And then to open our connection, we use ole db connection. And then we say dot open. Like that. And then we've got our open connection. The next thing that we want is to have an if statement where we check for the connection state. So we can have this. We copy that. We come to this page, and then we want our if statement. If, then we say ole db dot open. I think that's all I had here. Okay, we want the state, and then we check the connection state to be open. So let's just copy this as it is. We want the dot. That's the part we need. We come to this side, and then we paste that content there. Okay, so here's what we are saying. Okay, and if we want to check our connection, we want to check the actual state, then we want to have the connection state. If it's open, then we want to do whatever it is that we want to do. Okay, so this is the statement that we got. We're simply substituting some of the content that we've put so that we see how it works. The next thing that we need to then put is the content that follows. Okay, this we can use it as it is. So we want to display a message box to say it's connected or not. Let's actually just do it ourselves and see how this actually works. So we want to change a little bit. We want to say message box dot show. That's the first instance. Else message box dot show will be as follows. So the first thing we need to put in this message box is a positive and a negative. So connection successful, else this becomes connection failed. Okay, we need a title, failed state. We also need a title there, and we put it as successful state, like that. Outside of that, we need a dialog result, like that. We put a comma as well. We put a message box, buttons dot OK, like that. So in other words, we're then saying here's what we are hoping to do. We're hoping to say when this form starts, we want to be able to check whether we've managed to locate our database or not. So if I run my project now, I'm supposed to get a result. Okay, let's just wait for it. We've got an error, but let's just try it. Okay, there is a challenge. Okay, this is usually caused because of the change that we did. We changed this form 1. Let's see where this is located. It can easily be solved. Okay, it had actually opened, I had not noticed. Okay, so in this particular instance, here's where our problem is. We don't have form 1 now, we now have main add, like that. I'm sure if we run it now, we should be able to get our code running. Sorry, I had not seen that, and it was going to take us a bit of time to fix. Okay, perfect. So now that that is working, we should have our code running well with no errors. I know it still doesn't make sense at the moment, but we'll work on it until we get to where we need to get to. Okay, so this seems to be working fine. We don't need this anymore, so let's actually remove that. This is not part of our code. And in essence, if this is okay, it then means we've managed to load our form, we've managed to successfully connect to our database, but as we add more, we'll be able to see what each element does. So this is a correction to the error that we had in the previous project. I'll also return to that project so that we can be able to see how we correct certain things in our work. Okay, let's add a bit more code. We are just modifying what we have here. As you can see, this is the previous one. We've literally changed this and put some different content, although we haven't actually added this part. So we now need to catch the exception and close our connection. Okay, this pretty much works. We can copy that as our catch statement. So we can paste, that for our exception. We also need to have our finally, and then we close the connection so that we can be able to close our connection. So this changes because this is not what we've got. We've got Ole DB connection, and then we close that. So that then means on this part we are done with the connection. The next thing we want to put now is we would want to put our load record. Okay, our load record pretty much gives us exactly the same content that we had previously, but we want to now implement content in this data grid view. Okay, so we'll need to actually work with that, but maybe, yeah, I think we can be able to pretty much work with it. Although I'm not sure why they had to redeclare most of these things, because they're exactly the same as these ones. Okay, I'll explain that in a minute, but let me explain it as we work with how we will do it in our own design. Okay, so in our design we've got it as follows. We've got a connection string, which we said gives us the SQL string that we want to work with. We've got the command, which gives us the command for getting the content within our database. We've got our I, which gives us our integer. We've got our adapter, which then connects to our database. We've got our connection. That's pretty much everything that we've got there. But we're going to do exactly the same thing to load this data grid. So to load our data grid, we know our data grid is data grid 1. We had not renamed it, but I was actually thinking of renaming it and getting the content that we need from our database and putting it there. So here's how we'll then be able to do it. We want to be able to get our data grid and give the source of whatever it is that we're working with. So what I'll simply do is I'll copy this code as it is, but I'll tell you the changes that we need to make so that it suits how we would want to do it in this particular regard. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we just want to paste the code. We expect to have errors, which is okay, but we then want to change certain context or certain contents of this. So originally this is load record. We changed load record to load add, okay, which is still fine, but we want to maybe rename this. We don't want this to be load, okay. We want it to be sub call data, like that. Okay, so initially we can put a comment to say this was load data, so that at least we can keep this in check and know that this is what we're working with. At the same time, maybe we can leave everything as it is, but we work with the same connection that we've got there, which is this one. I'm not sure why they changed, but since we're working with their code, we'll just paste everything as it is, okay, like that. Although now we need to change this part for the SQL. Our table, we had put it as TBL products, so we need to come here and change this to TBL products, like that. Okay, and then this then becomes Ole DB Ole connection, like that. Then we're good to go. Okay, this we had not changed it, so it's data grid view 1, so that's fine. Let's actually run it and see if we are getting a different value. Okay, we're now getting the same content that we had on the previous project, which still then means we have sort of gotten back to the same place that we're at when we decided to create this project. But that's fine. At least if we're not getting any errors, it means our connection some way, somehow is working the way we are hoping that it works. So in the next portion, I'll be explaining or showing us how we can go around this bit.